Okay, so let's talk about marketing. There's a number of things to get through with this, and I'm going to be touching on a number of different topics, as you will see. So let's talk about set-asides, number 67. Set-asides can actually be more competitive versus total small business or full and open contracts. So the idea with set-asides is like, oh, we should get this set-aside, because it's going to give us more opportunities. It's going to open us up more. And that is true. You do gain access to the ability to bid on contracts that you would otherwise be prevented from bidding on if you didn't have the set-aside, right? And the main set-asides we talk about is total small business, woman-owned, hub zone, veteran-owned, and 8A, right? And then no set-aside means it's full and open or unrestricted. So those are the different classifications and categories. So to, go through a process to, become 8A or woman-owned, right? That's going to give you access to additional, contracts that are behind that gate. But what happens is typically the more you have to put into something, the more you're going to use it and the more you're going to want to get out of it, right? Naturally, because you invested into it, so you're not just going to ignore it. So what that ends up creating is a competitive environment of many small businesses that are woman-owned small businesses that are being quite active, right? Versus something like the total small business set-aside, where that's the only set-aside where you don't have to necessarily do anything to be able to play in that space. You just have to be below a certain size standard, right? And so in total small business set-asides, it's still quite competitive, but we're not seeing that additional spike in competitiveness because folks have gone to an extra length to obtain that particular set-aside. Does that make sense? Just like a GSA schedule, typically around $25K to get on a GSA schedule, and you get to, bid on contracts for a couple of years, and if you don't win a certain amount, then you get kicked off. So in that scenario, there is a lot of motivation to kind of use it or lose it, right? So on the GSA schedules, people are like, let's get on it because it's going to give us access. But everybody else on that same schedule feels exactly the same way. So they're going to be very active, bidding on as many things as they could because they are invested in it. Does that make sense? So I'm not really saying not to do anything. I'm not throwing advice in this one. I'm just adding another level of thinking about it, is that set-asides, and specifically some of the more socioeconomic set-asides that we talked about, they are more competitive so there's more competition to go against once you acquire it, not less. Okay, and I think the idea is that it's going to be a reduced pool of bidders, right? But it's fewer that could go after it, but a larger percentage of those that can are, because they are invested. So hopefully that shines a light on that. And what my advice is when it comes to set-asides, generally speaking, is just you don't go and collect them like they're Pokemon. They're not going out of style. They should be supplements that you add to your business. If you don't even know how to bid, if you don't know how to win contracts, you don't need to worry about trying to get all the set-asides that you qualify for. Because then you're not even going to be able to make use of them anyways, specifically like the 8A program. Let's rush out and get into the 8A program. And most people waste, the first 3, 4, 5 years in the program just trying to figure out what they're doing with their business and how to play this game. Wouldn't it be great if you could use the full 9 years already knowing how to use it to maximize your time in the program? And that's more so what I'm suggesting, to time these things at the right time. But instead, we don't know what to do, so let's just go out and get all these things because at least it makes me still feel like I'm being productive. But you're not really, you're kind of just wasting time. So number 68, the goal of a meeting should either be to get another meeting or to get an introduction to another person. So meetings do not result in contract awards. And I'm not a big proponent in this form of marketing for brand new GovCons. Okay, maybe it scales up the longer you're in the space, for sure. But starting out, you don't even need to be having any meetings, in my opinion. But if you are, and if you insist, then your goal should be to have a follow-on meeting or to have an introduction meeting or a referral meeting after that with somebody else. That way it keeps going. You don't want to have a meeting and you meet with the person, like capability briefings, right? Like you shake hands, you learn a little bit about it, and then you say goodbye, and then there's nothing comes out of it. There's no follow-up, there's no next steps, there's no nothing. And it's almost like, okay, you're gonna give me a contract now? No one's gonna give you a contract in that format, and they actually can't. So we can't let that be the goal. If that's the goal, like, don't even do it. Save your time, right? This is why we gotta watch our time, our priorities. We need to focus on revenue generating activities, because too many folks are doing all these things that they're told that they should do, but they're not aligned with what your core business operations are or should be. So if you do insist, or there's an opportunity and it makes sense, fine, use your own intuition. But don't let it just be a one and done thing, because nothing's ever gonna come out of it. There has to be some sort of next step or some sort of follow-up. Okay, that's the goal. Number 69, capability statements. Capability statements are not going to win you a contract. There is an overemphasis in the space, I would say, on having the perfect capability statement. You don't need to have the perfect capability statement, and a capability statement is not the first and most important thing that you need to do. Also, capability statements are not part of a bid response. They have nothing to do with bidding and winning contracts, okay? That's not what everybody would tell you, but it's the truth. Very, very, very rarely where will a capability statement be part of an evaluation factor or part of your instructions to offers in the solicitation you're looking at. Less than 1% of the time, okay? Capability statements are used for sources sought responses. They're used for conferences, right? They're used for conducting capability briefings. You can use them to share with your subcontractors, that you have credibility, that you have a business or an umbrella or what have you, to educate in that way. But they are not technical in nature. Okay, so capability statement is not going to win you a contract. It's just not. And they also should be tailored to whatever you are sending them. So you shouldn't just print off a million of these things, because almost every time you're using it, you should be changing it a little bit, right? Whether you're adding, subtracting NES codes, whether you're highlighting certain services more than others, because you're using it as a purely marketing thing. You want it to match whatever event, meeting, sources sought notice you're using it for. You want it to best match and reflect capabilities where there is that overlap, right? We talked about government buys as sub-supplies. Like, you as a prime contractor, you want to have a lot of overlap between what you offer and what the government needs. Being mission focused, you want your capability statement to be mission focused to whatever mission agency you are supporting. Too many kind of get that mixed up backwards. Next, website. Do I need a website? You don't need a website. Websites are never used in proposal evaluations. Some people say, oh, you can just send contracting to your website to see your past performance or to satisfy some sort of technical requirement. Absolutely not. You'll just be found to be non-compliant. They're not going to go visit your website to read something. It needs to be in whatever volume, whatever section of the proposal it's written and formatted that it needs to be in. Your website just doesn't play a role. Okay. At most, it is used for contracting officers conducting some forms of market research. They may visit your website. If it's linked to your DSBS SBA profile, fine, they may. If it's part of your capability statement, they want to, fine, it may. But it's not going to circumvent you still need to learn how to submit a bid, reasonable pricing, compliant offer. Like, it doesn't play a part in that fundamental piece, whatsoever. Now, where I do see a website coming actually is more important is we see a lot of imposter syndrome in the space, and that's because we have a lot of new GovCons who have never owned a business, and now they're starting brand new government contracting businesses, and they feel like an imposter because they've actually never made $1 in their business yet, and then they have to present themselves as if they are, a seasoned, business owner and government contractor. And so I can appreciate and empathize with that feeling. Especially when you're trying to get quotes from subcontractors, you're trying to solicit teaming partners. What do you do? And it's like a real estate agent who's never sold a house, but they have a broker that backs them, but they've never actually written up a deal before. But does that mean they're not capable of doing it? No, it just means that they've never done it and they could be a little in their heads about it. Same with imposter syndrome in this space. Doesn't mean you're not capable of doing a deal, just means you haven't done it yet. It means you haven't put the deal together yet. But you can, like you absolutely can. But that imposter syndrome comes into play. So having something like a good website that brings, say, your capabilities to life can help to not eliminate, but to somewhat bridge or soften that imposter syndrome gap that you guys are feeling. So I feel, the CAPE statement, the website, they're better used for your own mental game than as actual tools that like somebody in contracting is actually going to be interested in. Okay. So they serve their purpose, in my opinion. NES Codes. So NES Codes should be fluid. These are things that you can add, edit, delete from your entity registration, in your workspace on sam.gov all the time. Okay, when you're submitting bids, you should be reflecting those NES codes in your offers. Some would say technically you don't have to do that. Okay, technically fine, but technically when you have a contracting officer saying they want that in there to issue an award, which has happened to me on numerous occasions, as well as clients that I've worked with, where they were like, I'm glad that I had that code in there because I prepared them ahead of time for it and they won, right? So this technically stuff, it doesn't do anything for me. I mean, do you want to get the award or not? And it's not necessarily that you're not going to win the award, but it's going to be a bump in the process because it's going to take a couple days to update. They're going to have to sit on it. It's just a waste of time. And a couple of days can be a lot depending on, what the requirement actually is. Some cases it's not a big deal. Others, it's a very big deal. So you just don't want to be on the wrong side of that. So what's wrong with updating your NES codes on a regular basis to reflect the type of offers you're putting out there and the type of requirements that you're responding to? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So it should be fluid. Think of them as fluid, something that's constantly changing. I mean, should your business not grow and evolve and adapt? Of course it should. So therefore your offer is going to, as will your codes. So NES codes should be fluid. Okay, number 72, add NES code when submitting bid and refresh each quarter. So we pretty much just covered that. Just keep in mind, I think a good practice is to refresh your NES codes each quarter, if nothing else. That way you know that you're staying on top of them. Number 73, if you can't win contracts on SAM, you don't have any business getting on a GSA schedule. We've talked about GSA schedules a number of times already, but it's just the truth. If you don't bid, if you don't know how to bid and haven't won a few contracts yet, the problem is not the lack of a GSA schedule. The problem is the things that we've already covered with alignment, your offer, how are you positioning yourself? Are you positioning yourself to win? The problem is not the lack of a GSA schedule or some other thing that you need to pay a lot of money for. That is not the problem if you're not winning. Promise you. Number 74, hiring someone who used to be in the government is a very long-term play and is too expensive for beginners. So in the space, for marketing, there's a lot of hired guns out there that have, worked within an agency. They know a lot of people and then they retire, then they go to the other side of the fence. And they work for a contractor. A contractor picks them up, puts them on their board, or puts them on their payroll to an extent. These people are quite expensive. And in my experience, they don't do a whole lot. They're the ones that like to build these big pipelines and show all this stuff that they've got coming in, but then nothing ever comes in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, keep it that way. In certain instances, they can be a long-term investment, but they're going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. Do not need to worry about that at all right now. Number 75, indirect marketing versus marketing. So just to understand, I would classify direct marketing efforts as responding to sources sought notices, as attending government conferences, as doing capability briefings, right? Or emailing that out. I consider those forms of direct marketing, trying to develop relationships. the known reason for these things is to market the business. Okay. And we've covered all of those in various other lessons, and I don't think that is the right approach for new GovCons. For new GovCons, I recommend indirect marketing. Let me explain what I mean by indirect marketing. I believe indirect marketing happens as a result of doing the most important things, which is, in my opinion, playing the numbers game, doing revenue generating activities. For example, if you're going on a site visit, you're going to meet people there, right? But you're doing it in alignment with submitting an offer, right? If you respond to a bid, or if you submit RFI questions for the bid, you're also kind of letting them know who you are. But you're showing up in a way that means you're here to do business. You should be one who's being taken seriously, more seriously in some instances than one who's emailing out a capability statement or doing some of these other forms of direct marketing, okay? Because contracting, they don't have patience for that. Trying to work the system, work loopholes. There's actually regulations where that's illegal to do. So you have to be careful. You for example, you cannot shape a specific requirement for a business, although people out there teach that. And there are the folks in contracting that develop these warm and fuzzy relationships with a contractor or vendor and shape a requirement just for them. And people are out there, go to LinkedIn, I'm not gonna name names, but they build their whole business off of teaching you to do this. It's illegal. It is illegal. It is in the FAR. And I'm not gonna get into that piece of it, but you can't do that. You cannot do that. You're crossing the line of bias and favoritism. Because you're making, everything has to be about fair competition, right? We all agree. Fair competition in the space, promoting competition among small businesses is what everybody's here to do. Okay. Well, if you're dialing something in for a specific company before the requirement is even out, that is not fair competition. But that's what people teach you to do, and it's actually against the regulations. So direct marketing versus indirect marketing, I was giving you some examples of responding to bids, attending site visits, submitting RFI questions, or even scheduling the debrief. What do you think is going to happen if you target an agency or contracting office or a few contracting officers and you're responding to their requirements throughout the year? And then you're getting feedback from them, even though you're losing, you are, how can I do better, right? And then you're showing up with those improvements time and time and time again. After a while, they're gonna be like, yeah, we're going to award to you. And that's like the most guaranteed way, if you could use that word, to start winning contracts is to use that form of indirect marketing. You're not in their face. You're not saying, hey, look at my thing. You're not saying, hey, give me a contract. You're not trying to set up meetings. You're just showing up. You're showing up to do the work. And they respect that and they appreciate that because they don't very often have a lot of bidders on some of these requirements. And if you're showing up time and time again, making the improvements, you absolutely will be winning. And I can speak for 100% of contracting by saying that, okay? So direct marketing, indirect marketing. I recommend indirect marketing because not only are you doing that, but you're also learning to build your skill set. It's totally aligned with playing the numbers game. It's totally aligned with revenue generating activities. Man, I just can't think of anything else better for you to do. And I literally mean that. I literally mean that's exactly what I think you should be doing. Number 76, relationship marketing comes over time, and it does. After you get some contracts under your belt, you get your foot in the door. As I said before, with the momentum and the snowball effect, it starts to roll in your favor. And again, that doesn't mean bias or favoritism. It just means contracting is able to evaluate you because you have now gained direct past performance, right? You're more competitive in your offers through it. It's not favoritism. The relationship marketing is it's you showing up. It's also like the indirect marketing. It's you continuing to show up. That does matter, and that form of marketing absolutely does build relationships, okay? It's just not the way that we think, or, it's like using you don't want to be like the whole, used car salesperson type vibe. That's what I feel like direct marketing kind of comes across, because most don't also know how to do it right either. Indirect marketing is it's a byproduct. It's a result, and you essentially kill two birds with one stone doing it that way. Okay, so now I promised for marketing that I would kind of break up the quarters for those of you who are not familiar with seasonality and some of the things that you can do to, like, in winter, instead of freezing, you learn how to ski, like use it to your advantage, right? So we got the first, second, third, and fourth quarters. So number 77, the first quarter is October 1st through December 30th. This is the slowest time of the month, slowest time of the year rather, these 3 months. 1 quarter, 3 months, okay? Slowest time. And it's slow because contracting had just come off of their busiest time, which was the 4th quarter over the summer. The budget cycle has ended. They're on a new budget, right? So they haven't gotten most of their funding yet. It's too soon. And this is when they use a lot of their vacation time. So they're literally just not at their desk. And then we hit the holidays, and then they're really not at their desks. So during the first quarter, it's great to kind of like sharpen the saw. If you want to refresh your NES Codes during this time, if you don't have a website, it's a great time. If you've been wanting to, but you've been too busy, this can be a great time to get something like that up. If you want to refresh in your CAPE statement, if you're looking at doing like internal, more operation things with like team members, so that things are teed up to go at the start of the new year in a few months, those are great sort of activities to do while you're bidding year round. You're just probably going to be bidding less because there's less opportunities, literally a physical count. There's fewer of them during these slower times of year, right? But then you're still using this to kind of prepare things, right? Second quarter, January 1st, March 30th, through March 30th, this is number 78. Contracting is kind of back to work. We're seeing a lot more source of thought notices come out. So if you're at the stage further on in your business where source of thought is part of your expanded vision for your business, this can be a good time to start to incorporate those. Conferences and marketing, again, if you're at the stage of your business where these supplements make sense, like you've already proven that you're successful, now you're just adding these on as supplements, these can be great things to start adding to your strategy during this time of year. Also, the first quarter and the second quarter, also reviewing agency forecasts, if that's something that is important to you. I'm kind of lukewarm on agency forecasts, but you can also start to track those as well during the first and second quarters. Number 79, during the third quarter, things start to warm up. So April 1st through June 30th, we're seeing a warming up. We're starting to see more awards being made. Not to mean that no awards are being made the past 6 months during the first and second quarters. No, awards are made year round. Bids are solicited year round. It's just the emphasis and the weighting increases as we go through the quarters. So we see more bids put up, we see more awards being made, and we see more funding being issued. And if you are doing, whether it's direct or indirect forms of marketing, this is kind of the final quarter where you're really going to be having an opportunity to do that in preparation for the really, really busy season. So the really busy season, this is number 80. We hit the fourth quarter now. This is July 1st through September 30th. This is the busiest time of the year. Contracting is working night and weekends, and you probably should be too in your government contracting business. Contracting is operating from a motto. Most of them, all of them, spend it or lose it. As it relates to their budget, their budget's decreased by the amount of money that they didn't spend, so they want to make sure that they spend it. And in some instances, that means they're spending it on things that they don't necessarily need. And I'm sure we've heard those stories on the news and stuff too. But it still very much happens, right? But a lot of the craziness is hopefully cracked down on. But this can be a time to let contracting know that you are there if they need anything, right? So if you have existing relationships, you can tap them on the shoulder. But their contracting is not going to be very responsive during this time because their highest and best use activities is like they want to get as much that's on their desk out and awarded and procured, okay? So really, like, you're playing the numbers game hardcore primarily during this month. But if you're having some gaps or you just want to tap your relationships on the shoulders, You absolutely can, because they may just have stuff and they're like, hey, I got a statement of work. Can you give me a quote on that? Hey, we need some office furniture. Like, things like this happens all the time. And I truly say you just don't know what's going to happen. And you want to save the ask, like you don't want to try to put yourself in a position when you don't have that relationship, right? And like, if you've been doing indirect marketing specifically for a while, then you've kind of built up that goodwill. And so, these are relationships that you should be carrying on with you quarter after quarter, year after year in building. And some are going to stick, right? Most won't, but some will. And you just need a little bit that's going to kind of help you. And that's kind of rounding out how I believe marketing really works effectively in the space, rather than the spammy approach, rather than the, let's just crawl websites and get every contracting officer's email address and just send out their capability statement, or send out hey, let's have a capability briefing, and then double down on the ones that respond. I'm just not a big believer in that type of direct marketing. I think that indirect marketing is really gonna work for you that much more. And you can do it in alignment as these different quarters go through, and you can play to these seasons. And these are some of the activities that you can do throughout the year, and learn how to kind of play the game rather than kind of going against the grain on things. Go with it. So those are my thoughts on some of the marketing activities for you. And so we will see you in the next part.